Well, lesson 3 of the life of David. We're going through a biography of the life of David. We've seen some of his background, where he comes from. And in the last lesson, we really saw how he begins to come to national prominence as God begins paving the way for David to become their king. This is not something I think the average Israelite citizen anticipated actually happening. Saul had children. Why in the world wouldn't his children, and the natural assumption would be that they would sit on the throne? Saul himself, even after God expressly tells him, also desires for his children to sit on the throne. And I think it's interesting how this all plays out. God really goes to battle on David's behalf over a good part of this. But let's take a look now at David. He's in a bit of a predicament. Saul has tried to kill him twice now as he begins to unhinge. And he sets him out as a captain of 1,000, which that plan ends up kind of backfiring, because now this incredibly people person is out amongst the people, and we see that begins to create some issues also. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and we're going to pick up our reading in verse 17. 1 Samuel 18 and verse 17, we'll begin reading. And Saul said to David, "Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give to thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul said, "Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him." And David said unto Saul, "Who am I? And what is my life for my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" David's humility again. But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the Meholathite to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. And they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, "I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Wherefore Saul said to David, "Thou shalt be this day my son-in-law. Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain." Now, there's a lot in here, but we see a lot of Saul's actual attitude toward David, not as a person. I believe Saul loved David as a person, but now he's a rival. And he promised the killer of Goliath, or would be given a daughter. And so he said, "Here's Merab, my daughter. You can have her to wife." But instead, we don't know how much time passes or what exactly the circumstances are. But she ends up marrying somebody else, which I think is just totally weird. How do you mess that up? I have no idea. But Saul really is plotting to have David murdered by the Philistines, and he's using his daughter Merab as bait. If David would lead the Philistines into battle and be courageous, Saul would reward his valor with marriage to Merab. Well, he had a right to marry one of the daughters of the king by virtue of killing Goliath. And now Saul's like, "Well, do this also. Fight the Lord's battles, and then you can marry my daughter Merab." And so he does. But we see that Saul's attitudes are way off. He claims that he wants David to fight the Lord's battles. His real motivation is that he wants David dead, but is strategically wrangling to have his dirty work done for him. Really, murder by battle positioning. Sound familiar? Same tactic David would later use with some success. David is humbled by the offer, and apparently suspects nothing as of yet. So Saul pulls a switch on David, gives Merab to another man. And now some political positioning is starting to take place. Michal, another daughter of Saul, was in love with David, and Saul took the opportunity to keep his word, but still maneuvered David into death by extreme military demands. Let's look at verse 22. David begins to perceive Saul's challenge and really takes it to the next level here. Look at verse 22. "And Saul commanded his servants, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servants spake those words in the ears of David. And David said, Seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man, and lightly esteemed? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall he say to David, The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew the Philistines, 200 men, and brought their foreskins, and gave them in full tally to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Samuel gave him Michal his daughter to wife. Now, whole story here and a whole subset of emotions and motives going on in this story. But David perceives that Saul is giving him some challenges at this point, and Saul offers his daughter Michal to him in marriage. David replies, there's no way I could pay a dowry for the king's daughter. My father's not rich, our family's not very well known. And Saul says, I don't want money. Here's what I want. I want physical evidence that you've killed 100 Philistines. And David, his hopes were that David would either give up, fail, or be killed. David agrees to the terms and brings back evidence of not 100, but 200 Philistines that had been killed. Saul gives Michal to David for a wife. It almost feels grudging in the verbiage. Fine, take her. I guess I can't really keep her back from you. Verse 28, then, picking that up, and Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David. And Saul became David's enemy continually. The princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much sent by. So you can imagine Saul's frustration as chapter 18 closes out, that he's hoping his daughters will be a stumbling stone to David, that he'll crumble and mess up, and the Philistines will kill him. And instead of all this, he gives Michal for David to marry, and Michal actually loves David. So that plan isn't going. That's backfired on him, and it's obvious God is with him. So that isn't working for him, and it's obviously Michal's in love with David, and Saul's very afraid as his plan to destroy David from within was never going to work. The kingdom of Judah loved David. Saul's servants loved David. Saul's family loved David. And even the Philistines respected David. It was more than he could bear. More than anybody could bear. Here's your worst enemy as he sees it, which is so odd because David was such a faithful servant to Saul. But he had vilified him in his mind, and that was twisted by, I think originally at least, from the evil spirit of the Lord, and then his unrepentance continued to warp his mind further, and then he just refused to walk with God, refused to submit himself to God, and it messed him up for the rest of his life. But here's one of his greatest assets, greatest servant, one of those most humble people in his whole kingdom. And Saul viewed him as an enemy. David never was an enemy of Saul. So David is plotted against and protected, both plotted against and protected by the royal house. And that's where chapters 19 of 1 Samuel picks up. And so we see Jonathan's about to speak up. He's probably had about as much as he can handle at this point. And so let's take a look at verse 1. Saul spake to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul my father seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore, I pray thee, take heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where thou art, and I will commune with my father of thee, and what I see, that I will tell thee. And Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee were very good. For he did put his life in his hand, and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel. Thou sawest it, and did rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood to slay David without a cause? And Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, As the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all those things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. So we see, at least briefly, a reconciliation between David and Saul. Jonathan pleads David's cause. Saul's put out really a kill order for David, issued to all his servants, including his son Jonathan. If you see David, you kill him. Jonathan privately, and this to me, Jonathan is just the picture of submission. David's the picture of humility. Jonathan's the picture of submission. He goes to his father privately. He takes the order. In public, he's the king's man. But when in private, he goes to his father and he says, Listen, what you're doing, God gave us a great victory through this man. This boy has not sinned against you. You're sinning against him, Dad. And Saul, at this time, kind of acquiesces and says, Yeah, you're right. I'll withdraw my kill order. And for a time, there is some reconciliation between David and Saul. It's not going to last long, but there was some reconciliation there. He's restored to his court position. Now let's look in verse number 8. It's all great until David does something awesome again. And there was war again. Oh no, here we go again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him, and the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. So here's David, okay, mighty warrior, national hero, willing to be Saul's music therapist all over again. Which is amazing to me, because this is the same position he was in when he was trying to be killed twice. And now here he is, playing with his hand. A great war has happened. Saul's troubled. Saul has a javelin in his hand. David is really displaying some serious trust in God. Verse 10, and Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with a javelin, but he slipped away out of the Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, and put a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster, and covered it with a cloth. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. And Saul sent the messengers again to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers were come in, behold, there was an image in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster. And Saul said unto Michal, why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away mine enemy, that he escaped? And Michal answered Saul, he said unto me, let me go, why should I kill thee? So David fled and escaped, and came to Samuel in Ramah, and told him all that Saul had done unto him. And he and Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth. Now, I think at this point, we already know Samuel's afraid of Saul. David comes to him. He's going to try to do what he can to protect David, but they both kind of flee Samuel's whole town, probably assuming at some point Saul's going to show up. It's kind of an odd story. You know, why'd you hide your husband? Well, I was afraid he was going to kill me. He knew his daughter loved David, and yet he was so self-absorbed, so conceited, so unwilling to see anybody else's point of view, so narrow-minded in his own goals and ambitions and plots that he couldn't even see that somebody else might have a part to play in this, and it may not just be the way that he wants it to go. He just can't handle that. So Saul seeks to kill David again, and David's victorious over the Philistines again, and Saul attempts to thrust David through with his javelin while he plays the harp again. David escapes. Michal, the wife of David, the daughter of Saul, helps save her husband from her father. Saul sends assassins to his house, and they wait for him to leave his house to kill him. It is at this point that David writes Psalm 59. Psalm 59. So keep your finger in 1 Samuel 19, but turn over to Psalm 59, because we're going to look at this psalm together. We're at this place in David's life where he's running from Saul, and he finds himself in a really, really horrible position. Really, Michal does too. I really don't know that Michal didn't love David. We know that she loved David. She said so. Saul saw that it was that way. I think she was afraid of her father. And so she kind of made up a story. Unfortunately, just put David on the wrong end of things with Saul and in his mind, because he'd be willing to believe anything. But here in Psalm 59, certain of the Psalms have headings. And they tell us a little bit about the psalm and why it was written, and even some instructions. And like I said, this is part of a hymnology course, this biography of the hymn writer David, or in this case, a psalmist. And I took 3 classes to go through all 150 psalms, and I explained some of these things. We're not going to go into this much depth with the psalms here, but I do want to read the psalms, and I want us to put them in context of the situations in which they were written. So Psalm 59 opens with, to the chief musician, Altashith, Michtam of David, when Saul sent, and they watched the house to kill him. So this is where this is inserted in the story, Psalm 59. And so several things are listed in the title of this psalm. To the chief musician. Now, at this time in David's monarchy, now this changes a little bit later, but at this time in David's, when these inscriptions would have been given, it's quite likely that Asaph was the chief musician. We will go into Asaph's life a little bit later on, as David sets up the worship that will be transferred into the temple his son will build. Asaph, what an amazing, amazing character. You want to study the life of somebody who just knew how to worship God. Read the works of Asaph and study his life. There are several psalms that he wrote himself. But the chief musician at this time was likely Asaph. And by the way, David knew Asaph personally. That's how he got to where he was. Study it out. We'll look at some of that. It's really, really cool. Selah. All right, Selah. We're going to see this in a lot of psalms, or Selah, however you want to say it. The popular singing group is called Selah. But Selah or Selah, we don't really know exactly what it means. How it translates exactly. The best we can come up with is basically stop singing and meditate on what we just sang about. What I have actually written on this is there's no definitive assurance as to the actual meaning or use of the word, but the most popular and likely are its use as an instruction to stop and listen, indicating the importance and truth of the preceding text, or used as an indication to cease singing for a musical interlude. All right, so Selah just basically means stop singing and meditate on what we just sang about. Then Altashith. It basically translates to do not destroy, and we don't really know exactly what it means. Some people think it means that it is the name of the tune that the psalm was sung to. I do not, for a couple of reasons, mostly because the Miktam after that kind of gives another indication of approximately the same thing. This psalm was intended to be kept specially and to be used in perpetuity in the worship of God. And that's what I believe. And I believe that because the word miktam here in there is called a golden psalm. And this is interesting. A golden psalm, many people, or I should say, from what I have studied, believe that these golden psalms were possibly engraved in gold for posterity. They were of significant importance. Only 6 psalms in all 150 claim this distinction as miktams. Psalm 16 and Psalms 56 through 60. So 56, 7, 8, 9, and Psalm 60. These 6 are miktams, or golden psalms. They were engraved. And so when I see Altashith, do not destroy, and I see miktam, a golden psalm, I kind of get the impression that this heading means that David intends to have this psalm put into perpetual use in the worship of God. I'm not willing to die over it, obviously, but in my own studies, this is kind of what I get out of that heading. To the chief musician, Altashith, Miktam of David, when Saul sent and they watched the house to kill him. So let's read Psalm 59 together. If you follow along with me. Psalm 59. By the way, they're not chapters. They're individual songs or psalms. This is not Psalm chapter 59. This is Psalm 59. Deliver me from mine enemies, O my God. Defend me from them that rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of evil and save me from bloody men. For lo, they lie in wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me. Not for my transgression, nor for my sin, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves without my fault. Awake to help me, and behold. Thou therefore, O Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, awake to visit all the heathen. Be not merciful to any wicked transgressors. Selah. This first 5 verses, there's really a cry of deliverance from mine enemies. And you can imagine that somebody who's running from somebody who they have not wronged would certainly have cause to cry out to God for deliverance, yea, even justice in this situation. Let's pick it up in verse 6. They return at evening. They make a noise like a dog and go round about the city. Behold, they belch out with their mouth. Swords are in their lips. For who, say they, doth hear? But thou, O Lord, shalt laugh at them. Thou shalt have all the heathen in derision. Because of his strength will I wait upon thee, for God is my defense. The God of my mercy shall prevent me. God shall let me see my desire upon mine enemies. Slay them not, lest my people forget. Scatter them by thy power, and bring them down, O Lord our shield. For the sin of their mouth and the words of their lips, let them even be taken in their pride, and for cursing and lying which they speak. Consume them in wrath, consume them, that they may not be, and let them know that God ruleth in Jacob unto the ends of the earth. Selah. Crying down for the vengeance of God on the enemies of God who in arrogance think they can just do whatever they want and walk all over the will of God. David knew he was destined to be the next king of Israel. And it was an absolute arrogance, because I personally believe by this time Saul knew it too. An arrogance and a defiance of God, which is exactly what Goliath did, right? David calls down the vengeance of God upon the enemies of God. Now look, verse 14. And at evening let them return, and let them make noise like a dog, and go round about the city. Let them wander up and down for meat, and grudge if they be not satisfied. But I will sing of thy power. Yea, I will sing aloud of thy mercy in the morning, for thou hast been my defense and refuge in the day of my trouble. Unto thee, O my strength, will I sing, for God is my defense and the God of my mercy. Wow. Here's a man who literally has spies from the king waiting outside his wife has to let him down out of the window to escape the enemies, to escape the king's assassins. And this is what he has to say. God, I'm going to trust your word. I'm going to avenge my enemies, God. Avenge my enemies. But I'm trusting you, for you're my shield. You're my defense. You're my refuge. And these things are a continual pattern in David's life, time and again and again and again. They talk, he and Asaph both talk about God as their refuge, their rock, their shield, their buckler. Awesome, awesome stuff. Somehow Michal knew what was going on, warned David that if he didn't leave immediately, he'd be dead by tomorrow. She knew the determination of her father, evidently. Michal helps him escape out of the window. She fakes his body in the bed and told her father David was sick. So Saul attempts to kill David in his own bed and finds a dummy instead, which I just kind of think is kind of hysterical. Really? Those guys carrying the bed didn't realize that that wasn't a human body there? The whole thing just kind of, if it wasn't so serious, you'd just laugh your head off, because here these guys are like, well, the king's going to be so angry when he finds this out, and he goes to kill David and finds a dummy instead. And then he has the audacity to ask his daughter, why'd you help my enemy escape? I mean, basically he's asking, hey, how come you didn't help me kill your husband? Let's just think for a couple of minutes here. Why do you think she didn't help you kill her husband? She claimed David threatened to kill her if she didn't help him. I think this is self-preservation here. Was it wrong for her to do that? Maybe. Yeah, probably. She probably shouldn't have lied to her father. But here's a very warped individual, and this girl finds herself in this ridiculous situation that most of us will never have to face, at least not to this degree or this severity. And here, who can blame her for just a little bit of self-preservation at this point? I'm certainly not going to stand in judgment of her. David goes to Samuel in Ramah and tells him all Saul has done unto him. And that's where verse 18 finishes off. Now David's he's got to stay away. He knows that now Saul is so determined to kill me. I can't have anything to do with this any longer. So verse 19 of chapter 19, back in 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 19 picks up here. And it was told Saul, saying, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. And Saul sent messengers to take David, and when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as appointed over them, the Spirit of God was upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. And it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. This whole story kills me. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. He didn't learn the first two times, evidently. Then went he also to Ramah, and came to a great well that is in Secu, and he asked and said, where are Samuel and David? And they said, behold, they are at Naioth and Ramah. And he went thither to Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God was upon him also, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth and Ramah. And he stripped off his clothes also, and prophesied before Samuel in like manner. And lay down naked all that day and all that night. Wherefore they say, is Saul also among the prophets? Well, no, but that's neither here nor there. Saul found out where David was hiding, and he sends, the Bible says messengers. These were assassins. He was still out to kill David. These weren't just, hey, how you doing, buddy, postal workers that he's sending out after David. These are military folk who are sent out with a mark to take out, and he intends to have David killed, and he does it 3 times. And what I think is just so interesting, how warped he is and how determined he is to have his own way in spite of what he knew was God's will in his life. He does this 3 times. And it's not like, they fall by the wayside, they catch a plague, they get killed by robbers. They prophesy. And Saul knew what happened. When the news came back to Saul of what had happened, his assassins began prophesying. Saul knew what was going on. He does a 2nd time and then a 3rd time. Finally says, whatever, I'm going to do this myself. Then he goes and he starts prophesying, and God humbles him like Nebuchadnezzar. God humbles him. And he strips off all his clothes and he prophesies, and he's laid down in public all that day and the entire night completely naked before the people. And God has to completely humble him and say, shut up and sit down because I'm still in control. Sometimes God just has to stop us from our own stupidity. And sometimes it takes something extreme. Sometimes it takes something extreme. So this whole thing is really just kind of an odd situation. He lay down all that day and all that night naked. And we see here in chapter 20 now, verse 1, that David goes to meet Jonathan. Let's read verses 1 and 2. David fled from Naioth to Ramah and came and stood before Jonathan. What have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life? And he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it to me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. So David goes to Jonathan, listen, how have I offended your father? Why is he out after my life? This doesn't make any sense to me. And Jonathan said, hang on, bud. He doesn't do anything that I don't know or can't find out about. So just hang on, and let me see what I can find out. So David flees to Ramah, meets with Jonathan. Evidently, Saul brought an entourage with him because that's where Saul was. It's not like David ran back to Jerusalem to see Saul, or rather Jonathan. They run from Saul some more. This whole thing happens right in Ramah. Verse 3, and David sware moreover and said, thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. David expresses concern for Jonathan's life because they're such close friends. They've seen the madness in Saul, and David's not just concerned for his own life. I believe he knew his wife was afraid of her father, and now he's concerned for Jonathan's life as well. And there's just a step between you and death because you love me. Verse 4, then said Jonathan unto David, whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. Submission. What amazing, amazing submission. And David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I shall not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the 3rd day at even. If my father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me, that he might run to Bethlehem his city. For there's a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be very wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. Verse 8, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in mine iniquity, slay me thyself. If there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldst thou bring me to thy father? And Jonathan said, far be it from me. For if I knew certainly that evil was determined by my father to come into thee, then would I not tell thee? Would I not tell it thee? Then said David to Jonathan, who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? And Jonathan said unto David, Come, and let us go out into the field. And they went out both of them unto the field. And Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow, any time, or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, and I send not unto thee, and show it thee, the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do evil, to do thee evil, then I will show it thee, and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace. And the Lord be with thee, as he hath been with my father. And thou shalt not only, while yet I live, show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, Let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. Very tender words here. Precious relationship. And something, this does play into some events that are to occur later on. They devise a plan to find out if Saul still intends to kill David. Jonathan recognizes that David is the next rightful king of Israel. Look at verse 17. Jonathan caused David to swear again because he loved him, for he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan understood he would never sit on Israel's throne. And he submitted himself to God's man who was next in line. And he swore, he made him swear. He made him swear to show kindness to him and his household forever. And boy, David fulfills that promise wonderfully, so wonderfully. So they go out to devise a plan. What should I do? Is the king still upset with me? Is it okay to go back? And verse 18, we pick up Jonathan. And Jonathan said to David, Tomorrow's the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, and thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself from when the business was in hand, and shalt remain by the stone easel. And I will shoot 3 arrows in the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, Go find out the arrows. If I expressly say unto the lad, Behold, the arrows are on this side of thee, take them, then come thou, for there is peace to thee, and no hurt, as the Lord liveth. But if I say thus unto the young man, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And as touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever. Such tender words. Jonathan, again, he could have been selfish. No, I can hide you. I can just make sure to make you don't come in contact with my father. He didn't do the selfish thing. He did the selfless thing. Best thing for David. Hardest thing for himself. To send David away, if necessary, to preserve his life. Such precious, precious demonstration of love. Verse 24, So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. And the king sat upon a seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought, Something hath befallen him, he is not clean, surely he is not clean. And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the 2nd day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, Wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meat, neither yesterday nor today? And Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, Let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother he hath commanded me to be there. And now if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me go away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table. Likely Jesse's dead at this point. If his brother is now the head of the household, it seems to indicate that Jesse has passed on by this time. Verse 30, Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said unto him, Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to be thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul his father, and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. He tried to kill his own son. Saul is so consumed with self, he can't imagine the fact that his son is not, that his son is submitted to the will of God. He just can't even begin to imagine somebody who doesn't want to rule, be king. You idiot, he says, basically, in our modern language. You idiot, don't you know as long as he's alive, you will never sit on the throne of Israel. Yes, Jonathan knew that. And yes, Jonathan was okay with that. And yes, Jonathan was submitted to the Lord. Well, if his father's going to take him out, you can be very sure that he's not done being angry at David. So he was so angry that David did not attend that he attempted to kill his own son Jonathan for letting him get away. And so Jonathan signals to David that he needs to flee, and they part with words of promise and exceeding sorrow. I'm going to conclude this lesson with these words. So tender. I can't remember. There might be one other occasion that he sees Jonathan, but I believe that this is the last time David sees Jonathan alive. I'd have to go back and double check that. There might be one other instance where he sees him meet in a field somewhere. I can't remember. But this is the end of their ongoing relationship, where David is free to come and go, and they're free to have conversations as they need to be. And this is a marker in David's timeline where he understands that there's no getting over this. There's no reconciliation with Saul, and Jonathan also knows it and puts David's interests over his own. Look at verse 35. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. And he said unto his lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, Is not the arrow behind thee? And Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad knew not anything, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad and said unto him, Go, carry them to the city. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept one with another until David exceeded. And Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Kind of a really sad sort of a situation. These 2 good friends parted because of a situation that was completely and totally out of their control. And yet we see Jonathan also expresses faith in God, that this is God's will. He's fine with not being king of Israel. That's okay with him. This probably made easier by the fact that he loves who is to be the next king of Israel. But he's fine with it. He surrendered to the will of God. And wow, I mean, he's willing to give up this friendship. I mean, he's not really giving it up. David and Jonathan will remain friends all the way till Jonathan's death. But he's willing to give up this ongoing relationship because it's best for David. And David leaves. A very touching scene. Jonathan gives his artillery. He says the bows and arrows and the stuff that he was coming out to pretend to practice shoot with. He gives it to his lad. Hey, take these back to the city. And when he's alone, David comes out of hiding. They hug. A kiss. This is not a sexual kiss. Again, this is not a homosexual relationship, as is so often portrayed. This was a cultural kissing, like maybe in France or in Italy, where they kiss on one cheek and the other. A sign of intimate friendship. And they hugged and they kissed, they cried. And they said David even cried more than Jonathan. He said he exceeded Jonathan. And David departs. Jonathan goes back to his responsibilities, submitted back to his father. Why couldn't Jonathan just took off too? He probably would have saved his own life. That's not what happens here. He doesn't try to escape with David and hide from his father. He sends David off. The Lord between me and the Lord be between my seed, my kids and your kids. And he gets up and he goes back to his father. Just a picture of submission throughout his entire life. And wow, Jonathan signals David needs to flee. They part with words of promise and exceeding sorrow. And we'll pick it up there in chapter 21 next time.